They hear it before they see it. Not a buzz, not the thin, high sound you swat away without looking up. Something lower, something with weight behind it. It doesn't belong in the same category as anything that should be flying, and once you hear it, you don't confuse it with anything else ever again. This is the sound of the most dangerous insect in Japan. The beekeeper in Gifu Prefecture stops moving. His hands go still, not because he was trained to stop, because something older than training made him stop, because he understands what this leads to if he's right. He's been doing this for 22 years. He knows every sound this forest makes. He's never stopped being afraid of this one. Japan has bears, wild boar, the Habu pit viper in the south, a snake with a strike so fast it barely registers as movement. People know about these things. There are warning signs, there are protocols, there are entire regional agencies dedicated to managing the encounters. But this isn't any of them. Nobody puts up a warning sign for what just flew into that beekeeper's field. And that absence, that specific gap in what people think to be afraid of, is exactly where the danger lives. Vespa mandarinia, the giant hornet, the largest hornet species on Earth. And that word doesn't prepare you. It sounds like a category, like a statistic. It doesn't prepare you for the moment one lands on a branch, 2 meters away, and you realize it's the size of your thumb, that the wings aren't translucent the way wasp wings are, that the head is wide and flat, and the mandibles are visible from a distance, that should make mandibles invisible, that it moves with a deliberateness that smaller insects don't have, the way large things move when they don't need to rush. The beekeeper doesn't move. But here's what most people don't understand about that moment. He's not frozen because of the size. He's frozen because of what's behind it. A single scout. That's what's in that tree. One hornet, sent ahead of the others, doing something that feels wrong to assign to an insect. It's marking, a chemical signal, invisible, odorless to human senses, that functions as a coordinate. A message broadcast, not to the beekeeper, not to anything that can read it with eyes or ears, but to every other hornet in the colony. It says, here, and now it's waiting to see if the message gets a response. And once it's marked, it's already too late to stop what comes next. The beekeeper knows this. He learned it the way people in Gifu learn it, not from a textbook, the way you learn something with your body, by being close enough. Once that the sound changed, and the air changed, and something in him understood before his brain caught up. He backs away, slowly, without turning. Most people don't know to do that, and they don't understand what a scout actually means. They think it's just one insect. They don't realize it's the beginning of something much larger. Japan loses between 30 and 50 people to giant hornet stings every year. Not to snake encounters, not to bear attacks, to this. And that number has a specific shape to it that the raw figure doesn't show. These are not people who stumbled into nests carelessly. Many of them were working, outdoors, in the mountains, in the fields, in the forests that run along the edges of rural communities across Honshu and Kyushu and Shikoku. They knew the landscape they were in. They just didn't hear the scout in time. But the number isn't even the part that should concern you, because at the beginning, none of it feels dangerous. The part that should concern you is why it's possible to die from a single encounter, and what that actually looks like from the inside. A woman in Nagano Prefecture. Mid-September. She's clearing brush on the slope behind her house. The kind of work she does every autumn. The kind of work her mother did. Unremarkable, seasonal. She doesn't notice the nest until she's already too close. It's underground. The entrance, a small dark hole in the soil that looks like nothing. The first sting hits the back of her neck. The pain is immediate and specific, not like a bee sting, not a sharp surface pain, something deeper, something that feels. People describe it consistently this way, like a hot nail being driven into the tissue. The venom isn't just depositing chemicals. It's designed to penetrate, to reach. She runs. Most people run. Running makes it worse. Motion signals threat. And the hornet that stung her released a pheromone at the moment of contact, a chemical alarm that now hangs in the air around the nest entrance, like a lit fuse. By the time she's 10 meters away, she's been stung 11 times. Her vision starts to narrow. The sound around her collapses into something distant and distorted. She loses her sense of direction for a second, just long enough to slow down without realizing it. She doesn't know that yet. She's still running. The numbers don't show you what actually happens. The venom of Vespa mandarinia is not the most toxic among stinging insects. Measured unit for unit against a honeybee or certain ant species, it's not the most potent per milligram. But that framing is completely wrong, because potency per milligram is not how this animal works. This is where people misunderstand the risk completely. The giant hornet delivers a volume of venom per sting that is categorically different from other stinging insects. Multiple stings means multiple full doses, and those doses don't just add up linearly. They interact. The components of the venom, the enzymes that break down cell membranes, the compounds that trigger histamine release, the neurotoxic elements that affect cardiac tissue, they amplify each other. 11 stings isn't 11 times the problem of one sting. It's something that doesn't have a clean mathematical expression. And for people with no prior sensitization, no allergic history, no reason to carry epinephrine, the reaction doesn't begin immediately. She walks back to her house. Her hands are shaking. The sights are swelling. She calls her husband. She doesn't feel the reaction starting in her bloodstream yet, but it has already started. And the worst part, she can't feel it yet. September. This is when everything becomes more dangerous. It's also when the colony reaches its largest size. Through spring and summer, it builds. The queen laying, the workers expanding the nest, the population growing toward the tens of thousands. By September, the colony is at its peak. More hornets, more foraging range, more chemical sensitivity, more aggression in defense of a nest that now represents the entire year's investment. This is also when human activity in the mountains peaks. Harvest season, hunting season, mushroom foraging. Something millions of Japanese do every autumn in the forests above their towns. Two rhythms, the hornet's expansion and the human calendar, colliding at exactly the same point every year. The people who get stung in September aren't making different decisions than the people who walk the same forests in May and come home fine. They're just walking in September. At the exact moment the risk is at its highest, the beekeeper knows something that took him years to understand and that most people never learn at all. The giant hornet doesn't sting his bees. It doesn't need to. A scouting hornet finds a honeybee colony, marks it with pheromone, and waits for the others. When they arrive, they don't attempt to fight the bees individually. They don't need to. 2 or 3 dozen hornets can dismantle a honeybee colony of 30,000 in under 3 hours. Not by stinging, by decapitating. Systematically, methodically, working through the colony until there's nothing left but silence, and the hornet workers begin carrying the larvae back to feed their own young. He watched it happen once, his second year, before he understood what a scout meant. 30,000 bees, 3 hours. The hornets weren't aggressive, they weren't panicked, they were working. That's the part that stays with him. Not the violence of it, the efficiency. And that efficiency doesn't stay in the hive, it carries over to anything that triggers a response. There's a response, the Japanese honeybee, developed over thousands of years of this exact pressure. When a scout enters a hive, rather than fighting it or fleeing, the colony surrounds it. Hundreds of bees form a sphere around the hornet, vibrating. The temperature inside that sphere rises, the carbon dioxide concentration rises, and the hornet, which can tolerate temperatures slightly lower than the bees can, dies at the center of that living ball, while the bees themselves survive. It works. Against a scout, before the pheromone signal goes out, it works. That window is incredibly small. It only works if the scout is caught before it marks. If it marks first, the ball is too late. The beekeeper knows this. He watches every hornet that approaches. He watches for the one that lingers too long, that lands and walks, rather than simply approaches and leaves. The one that's doing something, not just passing through. 22 years. He's still watching. He'll always be watching. In the hospitals of rural Nagano, rural Gifu, rural Akita, the September patient list has a pattern that the emergency physicians recognize before the patient finishes describing what happened. The location, the time of year, the number of stings, the window of time between the incident and arrival. That window matters in a way that can't be overstated, because once it closes, everything becomes harder to control. The venom works on multiple systems. Renal failure can develop hours after the initial reaction, even in patients who feel stable, who walked to the car, who called ahead thinking they were okay. The kidneys begin to shut down quietly, without drama, while the patient sits in a waiting room thinking the worst is over. It isn't over. It hasn't started yet. Treatment exists, but treatment requires being in the right place, with the right equipment, within the right time frame. When the forests of Nagano are hours from anything, and the road down the mountain takes as long as it takes, the gap between the sting and the hospital is where most of the dying happens, not the attack itself, the time after it. The woman from Nagano makes it. Everything goes right, which means the right decisions get made in the right order, with no delays. And the hospital is reachable, and the reaction is caught before the second wave. Everything has to go right. She never goes back to that slope in September. She doesn't go back in October either, or the following year. Some knowledge doesn't leave room for risk assessment. Some knowledge just changes where you walk. The beekeeper drives home at dusk through the mountain roads above Gifu. The forest on both sides is dark now, the trees closing in over the road. Somewhere in there, the colony is still expanding, still sending scouts, still marking everything it finds with that invisible signal, that chemical coordinate that translates to a single word. Here. Tomorrow he'll go back. Check the hives. Watch the approaches. Listen for the sound that doesn't belong in the same category as other sounds. He'll hear it. He almost always does. The question, the same question it's always been, is whether he hears it before the marking begins. Because once it starts, there's nothing left to stop. Most days he does. Most days he hears it in time, and the days he doesn't, don't end the same way.